This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney and Jenkins. Hello and welcome to the 88th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This week, I have with me Dr. Dolores Fazzino, DNP. She is a visionary healthcare expert known for integrating spirituality and wellness into conventional medicine. With over 40 years of experience as a nurse practitioner and medical intuitive, she has performed 18,500 plus surgeries and collaborated with renowned specialists like Dr. Siegel. Dr. Fazzino's dynamic presence and empathic nature captivate audiences worldwide. Her personalized programs combine energy healing, intuitive counseling, and conventional medicine to foster healing and transformation. As the president of Spiritual Wellness for Life and Recovering Healthcare, she empowers individuals to take an active role in their well-being. With profound insights, inspirational stories, and practical strategies, Dr. Fazzino is a sought-after speaker offering enlightening experiences for listeners. I had a really thought-provoking and resonant conversation with Dr. Fazzino, and I believe that she has a lot of wisdom to share that you might find interesting, especially right now with so many changes happening in the world. So here is the wisdom of Dr. Dolores Fazzino. Organic conversation all about you and your story and how you got to where you are, and just giving you a platform to share whatever you feel like.
Oh, great. Thank you. All right. Well, cool. I'm ready whenever
Yeah.
you are. All right. No pressure. Okay, good.
So I will do like a separate bio introduction of you after the fact, just so I don't have to be like, hey, Dolores, tell me everything about you, because I think it's kind of boring. So try to like dive a little deeper right away. And so one of the first things that I like to ask my guests is, because this podcast is about unconditioning and following your inner voice, when
Mm.
first time that you can recall, like recognizing that you have this intuition inside of you and that you were able to recognize it and follow it.
Oh gosh. Well, that goes back way to my childhood because of course, I'm a little older than you, and I'm a product of the '60s and the '70s. So, what I'm kind of going to kind of share with you was considered really weird stuff because everything was in nice little boxes and the white picket fence, and you always worried about, oh my God, what will the neighbors think? Oh heavens to Betsy, and it's just like. So I was born an empath, intuitive, and highly sensitive person. So from the get-go, I pretty much knew things at a very young age. And I think probably when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I just had this inkling suspicion that I lived someplace else before. I
Mm.
just knew I did because it was almost like there was like I started having deja vu type of stuff where something just seemed so familiar that I had done it before, but yet how could that be possible? Because we're programmed to believe that this is it, this is what we see and this is what we get. But in essence, that's not the truth. And so, I would just, I remember going to a friend's birthday party, and way back when, you went to the Howard Johnsons and they had all these flavors of ice cream. And it was just like, oh my God, it's just like, what if I picked the wrong ice cream? And I felt like I had done that before, which was really trippy. And I'm thinking to myself, this is weird. It's just like, well, I could go another time and another time and place. I had another one, a different kind. It was just weird. So that was like the first thing that, and of course, you didn't dare say, you're thinking this and this, and yet, everything around you is something, different. So yeah, that was in the '60s. So, you figure that was, I want to say, cutting edge thought process because
Yeah.
that wasn't the way we were programmed to do that. You come to planet Earth and they try to mold you into something that you're not. So anyway, long
Yeah.
story short.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Connecticut,
Okay.
and I spent most of the first part of my life, or the first third of my life, in New England. And when I was ready to go to college, I left New England and went down to Philadelphia and stayed there for 7 years, and then moved back to Connecticut briefly for about 4 years in my adult life, and then whisked off to California for the last 36 years. So it was like one of those things that it was like divinely orchestrated, because I just knew I didn't fit in New England or on the East Coast. And when the opportunity came for me to go visit a friend who lived out in California, she basically said to me, she said, "You're going to be here a day and then you're going to move." And this was in March of 1988. And by July 4th of 1988, I was moved and on a beach in Southern California. So that it happened pretty quick. And you have to remember too that this was in, the late 1980s. We didn't have computers like we have and technology that we have today. I mean, everything was snail mail and, took forever. And I've been a nurse for the last 45 years, or in the nursing industry. I'm a nurse practitioner now, but at that time I was a registered nurse. And we have reciprocity between states. So you get your license in one state, you just need to apply for it in another state, and you just pay a fee and you get the license. Well, when that was all going down and I made the decision to move, I was told it was going to take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get a license, because everything was, paper trail and, really, no computers, no technology. I knew that this was something big when I had a California license in my hot little hand after 2 weeks. So it was almost as if the universe was saying, "Yes, please, let's go right now." And so I just followed the lead and I packed up, what I could in my little Honda Civic. And my mom, who was like freaking out that I was kind of moving cross country by myself. I'm 29 at the time, so I could do this by myself. But, she's old school, like, "Oh, you can't go by yourself." So we did a little girls' trip, which was fun. And I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity to spend with my mother one on one doing a cross country trip. So landed in San Diego, and the rest is history, and haven't turned back. So yeah, it's interesting how those kind of things happen. And, when you look at what many of us who are my age are experiencing, it's like we're witnessing so many massive changes and shifts in such a short, condensed period of time. It's mind boggling. And, yeah, that's the technology world, but being in the healthcare industry, and for me being specialized in surgery and an assistant surgeon, it's just like I've witnessed the evolution of how procedures are done, from, opening stem to stern to like minimally invasive and robotic stuff. So it's been fascinatingly um, rewarding to be witness to this and kind of bridging the old way with the new way as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's so many things that I want to ask you, so I'm trying to like figure out which
Well,
one is first. But
fire away, sister.
so as an empath, like growing up, was this understood in your upbringing and your family? Did you have like a spiritual connection that you were being raised upon?
Well, that's an interesting question, because my grandparents were more, or my grandmothers were more open and receptive to that. In fact, my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom, her and I were really, really tight. We were like, two peas in a pod, basically. She was a very spiritual lady, and I'm not saying religious, but spiritual. And we would talk everything spiritual when we would be together. I mean, I remember asking her about heaven and God, at a very young age. And she would tell me things. And she was a woman who was way ahead of her time and probably born at the wrong time. So if she was born in this day and age, she would probably really be flourishing and doing extremely well. But unfortunately, and she was born when she was supposed to be born, and the thing is, she was way ahead of her time, and I don't think it was ever really acknowledged. Yet she still is very instrumental and part of my life, even though she's been gone for well over 50 years. In fact, she's probably one of my biggest cheerleaders from the other side and my biggest supporters. And when you're able to have that type of relationship with somebody, it goes way beyond what you can and cannot see. It's always there. And in fact, I'm in regular communication with her. In fact, she was here last week, and we had a little chat, and it was just awesome. And so what I'm saying is that the veils are extremely thin right now as we are evolving, from what we see in our third dimensional reality, and as we're going and entering the age of Aquarius, which is more fifth dimensional reality, the veils become thinner. So it's easier for the other side to make contact with us, but it's easier for us to meet them halfway to connect. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. What was it that made you become interested in the healthcare industry?
Well, this is kind of an interesting story because believe it or not, I wasn't until I got to witness a miraculous healing of my father's long-term medical condition by a non-traditional healing modality. And not to really go into a very long story, there's some key components that, it'd be interesting to know that being an empath, intuitive, and highly sensitive person as a child, um, you feel things very deeply and you're very sensitive to a lot of different things. I was born into a household where my mother was not that. She actually, her MO for coping with anything was to ignore it, it'll go away. So she was not a feeler because she was a product of an alcoholic household, which, for her, that was her coping mechanism to deal with a lot of difficult stuff. Long story short, is that when you say ignore it, it'll go away to somebody who's an empath, intuitive, and highly sensitive person, guess what? When you ignore it, it gets bigger. So I used to tell her that it's not going away, it's getting bigger. And, I don't think she could understand that. So for me, I needed to channel my emotion and energy into another pathway. And so I got introduced to music at a young age and I really started to accelerate in that and excel. In fact, I was actually on a pathway to become a concert clarinetist. And right around the same time for the 10 years between second grade and 12th grade, my dad ended up having back surgery in the hospital, which was in the 1960s, and picked up a hospital acquired infection, which pretty much almost took his life. The initial onset of it, he was in the hospital for well over 2 months. And, remember, my mom was ignore it, it'll go away type of person. So she really tried to shelter us of what was going on, but I could feel that something was off and was not right big time. And so my dad recovered from that. And from 1970 to 1975, whenever his immune system would get compromised, his resistance would get low, he would pick up this whole sequela of what he experienced initially would restart again. So that happened between 1970 and 1975, four separate times. And so my life as a child and a young adolescent was an emotional roller coaster because we didn't know whether or not if dad went to the hospital, he was going to come out alive because he was on his deathbed every single time. And just dealing with that, and my mom having to deal with that and raising a family of six, including my dad, that's tough. That was really tough for her. So kudos to her for getting through that. So what had happened was in 1975, it was the last time that my dad had one of those episodes. The CAT scanner was the newest modern piece of equipment that was being introduced into medical care. And the CAT scanner, when you put them underneath there, you could see a whole plethora of things that you couldn't see with the naked eye. So he went underneath that and they found that where his issues were stemming from was his original surgery that he had back in 1966. And their solution was to do a massive back surgery called a spinal fusion, which in 1975 was in its neophyte stages of development. So it came with a lot of um, complications and issues. Like you could be paralyzed, you could be, you could die, you could get better, maybe not. And my mom was at her wit's end with that. So she started looking for other solutions. And remember, this is 1970s, no computer, no Google MD, none of that stuff. So we used to have magazines and newspapers, and she happened to grab a hold of the National Enquirer, which was one of those rags of the day that talked about a lot of different things. And in that magazine or newspaper, there was a feature article being written about a healer who was a reverend from Cairo, Michigan, who had the gift of laying on of hands. And he was being featured in an article because he had the capability and was able to successfully assist his brother from healing from leukemia, which in 1975 this was considered uber quackery. And of course, the Reverend had been doing this work for the last 25 years, since 1950, with a lot of success over the years. So my mom was all over this like butter on bread. My dad, not so much, because he was really a skeptic. And he had said to my mother, only if the surgeon agrees to this will I, allow this man to come to the house. So they were in the hospital at the time, and my mom said fine. So she went out to the front desk, and there was my dad's surgeon sitting there writing his notes and his charts. And you know she announced to him, that I'm thinking about having a spiritual healer come in to assist my husband with his condition. And he didn't miss a beat. He was writing. He looked up and said, sure, that'd be fine, and continued to do what he was doing. My mom went back to the room, shared that piece of information with my father, and probably not 10 minutes went by from that. My father agreed, and she went back out to the same nurse's station, same surgeon sitting there, and made the announcement to the surgeon saying, my husband agreed to have the spiritual healer come in. He stopped what he was doing, the surgeon, looked up at her and said, what are you talking about? I never agreed to that. So this is where a God moment comes in. And the next steps is where the miracle kind of happened. Of course, my mom didn't share that piece of information with my father. And a month later, Reverend Holmes was in our humble home in Connecticut. My mom flew him in from Michigan, and he was there with my two grandmothers at the time, my brother, my two sisters, myself, and my parents. And he was a very humble, but I loved his energy. And he just was a very quiet man, but very purposeful. And I don't know how he knew this, but he knew that my dad had one leg that was shorter than the other. We all knew that because my dad wore a lift in his shoe, but his shoes were nowhere in sight. My dad was barefoot. So I don't know how this man knew this, but he did. And as my dad sat down, he asked my father to raise both his legs. And sure enough, there was a 1 inch gap between the longer and the shorter. And he instructed my dad to lower his legs, and the reverend proceeded to put his hand on my dad's solar plexus, his belly, and on his crown chakra, top of his head. And he started saying some prayers and quoting some Bible scriptures. And maybe 3 minutes went by, and then he told my father to put both his legs up, and they were both the same length. In that moment, my life changed forever, because I knew that my mission in my lifetime was to go into healthcare. And remember, I was a concert clarinetist, and to bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual, and the visible and invisible. So that was the game changer for me. My father started wailing like a baby, like I never witnessed before, because remember, he was a skeptic. Okay. He needed to believe that something was actually happening in order for him to believe that it could happen. More prayers were said over my father. over the next half hour. And then he was instructed by the reverend to go lie down and rest because, as we know, any type of energy healing that we do, your body needs to reboot and recalibrate itself to a higher frequency. My dad slept for over 24 hours. A month later, he returned to the same CAT scanner. They found no evidence of his health condition or his problem. He never had to have that surgery. And he never had to revisit that healthcare problem in his lifetime. And he passed away about 12 years ago at the age of 80. So that has been the whole pivotal thing of being there. So trust me, it's been an interesting journey because this was considered uber quackery in the 1970s, okay?
Mm.
Where, so when you know things, but yet things are like really, how could I say it? It's dogma, old patterning, old beliefs, whatever is just like, and it's not what they claim it is. It's the illusion out here, but this was the truth.
Yeah, I've sometimes felt that my intuition has been buried under stress and noise. And I've experienced this a lot during my PhD work and research and juggling deadlines and creative projects. And that's when I really started to focus on the idea of mental wealth, investing in habits that create clarity and resilience so you can reconnect with your inner voice. Mental wealth comes from 5 pillars, and those include sleep, diet, exercise, stress management, and supportive tools like exogenous compounds. Magic Mind has been a key part of my routine. Their focus shots help me stay clear and connected and centered during busy days without feeling jittery. And I can still drink coffee if I want to, that's still allowed. And their sleep shots allow me to fully rest at night and wake up feeling refreshed. And that's really important because my days can be really long sometimes. So it's not about quick fixes, it's about the tools that support balance and alignment over time. In this January, Magic Mind is encouraging us all to invest in mental wealth with their 24-hour pack, and the focus and the sleep shots are bundled at 45% off. The link is in the description, and if you're ready to find clarity and reconnect with yourself, now's the time.
Wow.
So, being in the healthcare industry has just been a real stretch for me in a lot of different ways. And I'm just really honored and grateful and appreciative to have had that opportunity to move through all of that and actually be on the side of it now where it is accepted and they know that there's a lot of possibilities out there that there's no um, rhyme or reason for. And the illusion of evidence-based stuff is kind of crumbling because it's tainted with a lot of, oh, how could I say, corruption, for lack of a better description. And it's an illusion. So the thing is, and there's just too many variables to compensate for to get, a true blind study because each one of us is so uniquely individual that you cannot accommodate for all those, variables. So anyway, that's kind of like my story and I'm sticking to it. But like I said, the good news is it's like probably in 1990s when the internet, what is it, National Centers for Complementary and Alternative Medicine came on the forefront with our government. That's when things started to really, that was like the pivotal point in this whole, in my lifetime, where things are starting to look a little differently and a lot of alternative modalities are being looked at and possibly integrated and reintegrated into health and wellness, which is a good thing to witness. So yes, there's been a lot of really cool things. We still have a long way to go, but we're heading in the right direction. So that's good.
Yeah, I'm speaking of modalities, looking back on the experience that your father had, was there a specific modality that was performed on him through the Reverend?
It was pretty much laying on of hands. So, and he wasn't actually doing the healing. It was like the energy coming through him. He was the channel and the vessel. And he would say that too. He doesn't do the healing. God does the healing, which is true. He's just the vehicle that allows it to go through. And what's really cool too, we all have that innate healing ability. It's that we have either unconsciously or consciously given that power away to something outside of ourselves instead of tapping into it. Okay. A lot of times people bypass what they're feeling because they were been programmed that they need to go to the doctor to get a pill, a procedure, or whatever to fix that. And, being in healthcare for well over 45 years, I've witnessed that, a lot. And when people, especially when, it's like sometimes we do a huge disservice to our clients in healthcare because yes, we have sources and resources and education and stuff, but we forget about the patient itself, him or herself that have lived in their whole entire body their entire life. Okay. We're wired to heal ourselves. It's just that the wiring has been fractured, broken, numbed, so we're not able to tap into that. So it's about really teaching people how to reacquaint themselves with that, to learn how to access that. And it's actually your intuition. Your intuition is always talking to you, but we have been programmed that it's not okay to trust your gut, because that's not logical and it doesn't make any sense. So we can't be doing that. Newsflash, that's how you survive. And that's how you thrive if you're brave enough to trust that. Because you will find that you're going to get these downloads that are unique for you, not your spouse, not your kids, not society, but for you. These are the right things you need to be doing for you. But yet, people are either afraid of that, they don't believe it, they don't trust it, and they think something outside of themselves is going to have all the answers for them. And that is not true anymore.
Yeah. But all the power in your own hands, it's a lot of pressure too.
That's true. And some people don't want to take ownership of that.
I
Absolutely true, Whitney. Absolutely.
I am very intuitive myself and I do energy healing as well. So I've definitely been like even recently to places where my intuition is "Wah, wah, wah, wah," but like people are lying to me and it's been really challenging because I'm like, no, I know that this is true, but it's hard to fight through that sometimes.
And you know what? It's all about knowing which battles to pick and which battles not to. And that's fine if people are kowtowing and saying that's not true or whatever. I find it very telling about that person of where they are on their journey, because they're obviously not in their body, they're not tuning in, they're relying on something they have read, they've never had an actual experience. And that's kind of disrespectful and condescending and rude. And I remember one time, this is a funny story, but it's very telling too. Being in the healthcare industry probably about 10, 12 years ago, I was traveling a lot to South America to um, study. I was very fascinated with psychic surgery. And so I wanted to go and kind of learn a bunch of stuff, and the opportunities presented itself. And of course, at that time, I was working with a bunch of GYN oncology doctors, doing surgeries with them and stuff like that. And they were pretty open minded because they knew that I was an interesting character. And so, you either, and people either embrace that, or, they understand that, or some people are not awake enough to, or evolved enough to realize that this is a possibility. So, long story short, I returned from a trip and I was working with one of the docs in the room, and we were doing surgery on a patient, and the anesthesiologist is on the other side of the drape. And she said, "Oh my God, how was your trip to Brazil?" I said, "Oh my God, it was amazing. It was just totally amazing." So the and I wasn't going to go down that pathway, but the anesthesiologist kept saying, "Oh my God, you went to Brazil. So what did you do there?" I said, "Well, I did some studying and research." And he said, well, what were you studying in research? I said, complementary and alternative medicine. Well, what do you mean by that? So I looked over the drape. I said, psychic surgery. He totally freaked out. And he said, that's a bunch of bullshit. And I looked at him, and then the surgeon and across from me was saying, don't go there. I said, oh no, I'm going to go there. So I said to him, I said, so are you speaking, what you just shared with me, is this something you read or did you actually have an experience? Well, it's something I read. I said, well, you know what? By you saying what you just said, you actually are negating an experience that actually somebody actually had. And I said, don't you think that's kind of arrogant of you?
Mm.
Didn't say a word. And I continued going on to what I was doing because I actually was there and I had the experience. And you're telling me that I didn't have the experience? Shame
Mm.
on you. How disrespectful. I said, you cannot be doing this to people. How do you function in your world of medicine? People are going to tell you things that are very experiential, that they actually had the experience, and you're going to totally negate that? How dare you?
Yeah.
So
That's
that it's huge. This was interesting, and then the conversation stopped. But the point is that yeah, sometimes you have to go there and say what you need to say. But I didn't know what was going to come out of my mouth, but the right thing came out of my mouth because I was speaking from my heart space. But this is what we witness in healthcare and in the world too. Judgments and criticize things that they have no concept of what that was like because they never had the experience. And they're just because it's not like who they are and it's maybe a threat that they just react and they project all this stuff onto people. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and also because they've probably spent a lot of time studying that thing, that anything that would negate that would take away. I
Yeah,
think.
well, you know what?
But like, yeah, qualitative research is just as important as quantitative. People's individual experiences are really
Oh,
valuable.
I value that more so than anything that you could put because, research, I've done research before. I have a doctorate in nursing practice and I did clinical research for my dissertation. But, research and statistics, they're always manipulated. So, it's, I my professors would probably hate me for this, but it's just like I don't buy into evidence-based stuff because for me, it's not real.
Mhm.
You can't, it's hard to make that call when we know that like I said earlier, there's just so many variables that cannot be controlled because
Yeah,
everybody's so uniquely different. You just can't, anyway, long
I
story
agree with
short.
you. I'm getting my
So it's like if one person has a good experience, it's enough evidence based for me. Okay, next question. That's what I would say. It's just like they said, "Oh, what you do is not evidence based." I said, "Well, you know what? I'd have a little dialogue, and I would say that if one person has enough as a good
yeah,
result, I say,
right. I think
peace
it's
out, peace
also
out, have a good day."
like looking at the whole person and their whole experience of their life too. I feel like is something that is missing quite often, especially like in when it comes to like mental health and ignoring that aspect of that in general. So
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, everything is so interconnected in ways we have no idea. And it's kind of arrogant thinking that we have it all figured out. We're nowhere's near. I mean, I get privy being an intuitive. I get privy to a lot of information that would rock a lot of people's worlds because they're just not ready to hear that. And it's just like, but I know things. And
Yeah, like I don't want to dive down this road if you don't want to talk about it, but since you were in that industry during COVID, what was that like for you being intuitive and
I really had to trust my gut on that because I knew a lot of things that, and you have to realize fear runs rampant and people buy into fear.
Mhm.
Okay. And I was just thinking about this morning as I was in the bathroom, the toilet paper thing, how crazy that was. It was just like, how did they ever think that toilet paper was going to be, the issue to, we're going to run out of paper goods. And I'm thinking to myself, what the excuse the expression, what the hell? It was just like, how did they? And it was almost as if it was they needed to pull that energy and put it into someplace, the fear, because that's what it was. It was fear. And you got to witness people, hoarding and stuff like that, the behaviors that are rampant with fear. And I think it was because they really didn't have any other place to put that fear. So they created something in tandem with it because it was like the overspill of that. But it was kind of interesting witnessing that because I just cracked up because when that whole COVID thing started, I'm thinking like, well, okay, it's happening. All right, so we're on lockdown and people are freaking out because on lockdown. Oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? Ah! It's like, God forbid they have a relationship with themselves. That's a scary thing for some people because they can't distract themselves from themselves with work and everything else. So for me, this is a really funny story because when it all happened, I'm the type of person that, my mom raised me that, when something goes on sale, you buy extra of it. So you have like a little stockpile. Well, I was getting down to my last thing of toilet paper, package of toilet paper. So I went to the store, not unbeknownst to me that all this stuff was happening, okay, with, the whole paper goods thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in Stater Brothers and I'm like, where's like all the paper goods? And I realized, well, that's interesting. So this was 9:30 at night and I said to the nurse, well, I need to get like some toilet paper. And so out from the back comes this pallet of toilet paper. I kid you not. And it's in the aisle with where the paper goods would be. And the guy says, "Oh, I said, look, I said, could I get some toilet paper?" And he said, "Sure, take as much as you want." I said, "Oh no, I'm not a hoarder. I just want one package of toilet paper." Got it, put it in my cart, and they called the guy back with his pallet back to the back of the store because he wasn't supposed to come out till 11 o'clock at night, and it was 9:30. So this is what I mean. The universe was taking care of me. I knew that the universe had my back because this is what they told me. They said this is going to get really crazy, but it's just like observe. And
Mm,
and that's what I did. And being in the hospital was another interesting thing because of course we had regulations before COVID that you wouldn't do X, Y, and Z. And then during COVID, we were doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, especially with the N95 masks, we were like reusing them. And it's like, no, that's a one-time thing. And I just remember being at the hospital with having the staff meeting and the powers that be were saying this is what we need to do. And so I took three of the nurses and I said, okay, you're going to do what I'm going to do. These masks, take the things off, throw it in the trash, go get another one. Because it's just like, no, I'm not doing that. You got to be kidding me. It's just like I don't trust that. It's like trusting my intuition on things. And I knew that there were things and how it was being treated, that something was off because they were treating it like um, a wet pneumonia. In essence, it was a dry pneumonia. So the thing that they were doing the most was keeping people dry, and it was already dry. They needed to be hydrated. And
mm,
so that's why, and then there was other weird things that were happening too. All the deaths, people that would come into the ED, and if they would die of like natural, not natural cause, if they had a heart attack, they would label it as a COVID death. So it's like there was a lot of mislabeling of things as well. So it was just, excuse the expression, a shit show. And then when they introduced the whole vaccine thing and mandating people to get vaccinated, that was like a big shift thing because for me, intuitively, my intuition was screaming at me, do not get the vaccine like that bold. And I had to honor that. And being a healthcare provider to maneuver through the system with that information because I had privileges at several hospitals in San Diego and Orange County in California, and they were mandating that you needed to get a vaccination or you couldn't practice pretty much. And so I ended up calling a civil rights attorney because after 40 years of being in healthcare, I've never witnessed anything like this ever in my career. And I needed to find out what my rights were as a human being,
Mhm. Yeah.
let alone being a provider. And so I spoke with a civil rights attorney and she was awesome. She said, they cannot make you do anything and they could try. And I said, well, one organization is wanting a 25-page document as to why it's a religious declination. And she said, by law, the only thing that institutions could do is give you one sheet of paper with two boxes, medical declination, religious declination. You check either, and that's it. And she said, if they ask for anything further, that's considered harassment and it is a lawsuit. And I said, thank you very much. That's all the information I need. And that's what I did. And so, um, for one institution, I realized that it was a very toxic environment for me. And it was no longer aligned with who I was energetically. So I bowed out because I didn't want to be part of that craziness. And the others worked with me and supported that. And luckily for me, I've been in situations where that has been supported. So, and what we're finding now on the other side of the whole COVID thing, and it's hard to believe that 5 years ago we were in it, you know? It's crazy making how quickly time flies and what we've gained and learned from things. But what we're finding out now is that a lot of the vaccines are not good for people. You know, they're not for everybody. And what I guess is the most important takeaway that I'd like to share is that people need to trust their intuition on things. Maybe it is the right thing for you, and maybe it's not. But you need to make that choice for yourself and not be mandated by something external. Okay. Because you've lived in your Taj Mahal your whole entire life. When you're dialed in and tuned in and aligned with your body's wisdom, your body will tell you what you need and do not need. And when you veer from what it's telling you, this is when you pay the consequence. So it's learning how to trust that voice within you no matter what is going on around you.
Mhm.
No,
I
it's just like it's been an interesting ride. And I don't know why I was there during that whole time. And I was. And it's okay. It was a great learning opportunity and growth opportunity as well, professionally and personally, because having to deal with all that and all the different personalities and belief systems and, controlling things and stuff like that. So, and more is going to be revealed as time goes on as to why this is not a good thing. I've seen people who've had health challenges that have taken the vaccine, and even the ones that were maybe the health challenges weren't quite there, they were on the cusp of getting something, it catapulted them into getting the issue. Or people who've been in remission from, cancers or disease processes, and they got the vaccine, it kicked them out of remission.
Mm,
So it's interesting. There's a
yeah,
lot of things that are going to come forth in the next several years because of the long-term effects of things. But anyway, that's for another level.
I was right with you in my intuition and I did not get it. So
Good for you.
yeah.
Good for you for listening to yourself. This is huge.
Yeah, so I know that you work with clients doing energy work and you have your medical life and then this other part that has been with you your whole life. So what does that look like as far as your work with people one-on-one and individually and
Well, this is really interesting, Whitney, because I feel like what's really important right now is like people are awakening spiritually. So I kind of look at it from this perspective. People are either awake, they're awakening, or they're still asleep. And over time, more and more people start transitioning into the awakening process. And yes, my cat is here just wanting to say hello. That's Gracie. And so what happens is this: we have like things that happen in our world, like 9/11 was one of them, financial crisis another one, and of course our recent election is another one, where people are going to start waking up in waves, realizing the world isn't working for them, or when it had been, and they're just realizing there's got to be more to life than that. And it's about they're going through a spiritual awakening. So circling back is like, I help people who are in their spiritual awakening process, be it they're going through career transitions, getting of course, it's sometimes people end up getting a disease or something like that, having a health crisis. So it's just like whatever that is, I'm like the doula to help them with the spiritual awakening. Because when I went through my spiritual awakening a long time ago, it's like there was no resources, there was nothing. And it was just like I felt alone and really sheltered and didn't know where to turn to. And so I help people with that, to look at things from a deeper perspective within themselves, and to teach them how to trust that innate wisdom that is theirs, to reacquaint them with that and to trust that. So that's what I do. I work with those people who are on their spiritual journey, that are wanting to, um, you know, have a mentor, have a coach. I mean, it's not about me doing the work for them. It's about guiding them and leading them and empowering them to take the steps that they need. Because my goal is to teach people how to trust that wisdom within themselves, because that's gold for each one of us individually.
Yeah, it seems like you're right on time with all those things right now, and in this time of wherever we are. I think a lot of people are going to start waking up, so you might be really busy.
Well, and the other thing too is like, for those of us who are awake already, this is a time of coming to self and really shoring up our self-care and our groundedness, because many of us have transitioned from third to fifth dimensional reality. So right now what it's really about is just pulling up a lounge chair, popping the popcorn, and watching the show. As simple as that. And not reacting to that, because when you start reacting to what's going on in your external world, this is where you lose that groundedness within yourself
Yeah.
and that peace of mind. So it's just like observing it. And it's like, that's interesting. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And for many of us, it's about staying grounded in our truth right now. It's not about having to prove anything to anybody. It's about being who you are in alignment with what you are and everything about you. Make any sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if people would like to work with you, like where could we guide them?
Well, what they could do is go to my website, drdoloresfazzino.com, and they could just schedule time. And my cat's behind me doing all sorts of things. Gracie! She's like, Mom, I want my breakfast. I didn't feed her yet. That's what's going on. Where's my tuna? It's just like, never mind. Sidebar. They could reach out to me through my website. I also have a program called I'm Awake Now What, which is going to be launched as we speak right now. And it is a monthly membership platform that offers support, resources, healing, community for people who are on their spiritual journey. Because so a lot of times, there's certain topics that come up, and it's just to educate people too of what's out there, and teaching people how to lean into what is next for them, because maybe they need to explore something about forgiveness. And so each month we do a topic, with a lot of resources and stuff like that, and everything's available on that site. And so it's called I'm Awake Now What, and it's actually on my website, the Dr. Dolores Fazzino website, and you could click on that and get more information.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so people can click on it really easily.
Great. Thank you.
So I usually have one last question before we wrap up, and that is, if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
Trust yourself.
Yeah, there we go. That makes sense.
Trust yourself. That's
Good.
about it. All
Nice.
right. Well,
Very neatly with a bow right there.
that's right. With a nice red bow for the holidays.
Thank you
Gift
so
to
much
self.
for joining me.
Thank you so much. And it was a
Um,
pleasure being on and sharing with you.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to... Also, don't forget that you can get 45% off of the Magic Mind 24-hour pack with the focus shot and the sleep elixir with the link that is in the description and the show notes. Contact me or reach me. You can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay tuned in to you.